All right, hello. Thank you everybody for coming today. My name is Ashley and I'm going to be giving you a speech on judgment on teen pregnancies. So how many of you have either been a teen mom, known a teen mom, been in any kind of situation with a teen mom before? Okay, so we all know that teen pregnancy is a pretty common thing these days. And this topic is pretty near and dear to me considering 9 years ago, I myself was a teen parent. And I was on, I would say, the more fortunate side of it because nowadays you hear, and like a lot of the teen mom shows and stuff like that, it's, like deadbeat dads or no, the boyfriend not sticking around or a lot of bad situations. But I was fortunate enough to have a supportive family and a supportive boyfriend whom I had been with for over 2 years. So I remember coming home that weekend after finding out with my boyfriend that we were pregnant for the first time. I was 17 years old, about to turn 18, and I went to my parents' house, and I remember walking into the living room, and they were watching their favorite show, Alias, and they were like completely in the zone. And like dating Eric, we didn't really come around my parents' house too much because they were always there. We can never be alone, and when you're a teenager, you want that time alone. But his house, we could always be by ourselves. So when we came together to the house on a Sunday afternoon, they're like, what is going on? So I kind of whispered to my mom that I need to talk to her, and I kind of shoo her into the other room, and she knew something was up, and she prayed the whole way to the other room out loud, so it made it very awkward. And I sat her down, and I just started bawling uncontrollably, and Eric was with me the whole time, and we just told my mom that we had gotten pregnant, and she freaked out like I expected her to, but not yelling, just in shock, and immediately jumped up and ran to the other room and sat down to speak with my father. And after that, they asked us to come into the living room again and sat us down, and we all were just sitting there, and it was silent for a while, and I'm crying, and they're asking me why I'm so upset, and I'm like, I don't want to give my baby up for adoption. And my dad's like, we would never ask you to do that. Why would you think we would ask you to do that? And he gave me a hug and told me he loved me and that everything would be okay, and we'd get through it together. And so I feel like that for being raised in a Christian home with Christian values, I was very fortunate to have that kind of a reaction from my parents at that time. And I never had the talk with my parents. They don't believe, and they still to this day, with a teenage sister, at the age of 17 going on 18, about to go away to college, they still don't, and knowing what I went through, don't believe in putting the kids on birth control. They expect us to wait till marriage, and I value that. That's good for them. But I just think that a lot of teen parents are judged, and even though I had the support that I had, I got a lot of judgment, and a lot of people were prejudiced against us. Even though we were together, he stayed with me through the whole pregnancy. And when we told my mom, the first thing she said to us was that we needed to go meet with our pastor for counseling. And like when you tell somebody you're pregnant, like, well, what do we need to get counseled on? Like, I don't, like, how to raise the baby, like, what, the pastor's not going to tell you that. So we went into this meeting with the pastor not knowing what was going to be said or what was going to happen, and pretty much the only thing we did was we prayed. He confessed some private moments about himself, his indiscretions and whatnot, and how he came back from that. And, he told us that if we were to leave this meeting today and get in a car accident, that if Jesus Christ wasn't in our heart and we didn't say the prayer with him, like me and my unborn child would go to heaven and my boyfriend would go to hell. And I feel like right there he was judging me. He knew my parents and knew their relationship with God, but he didn't know me personally. He's just assuming that because of my parents, I was a Christian and that Eric was the only sinner and the one that brought all this trouble into the relationship. So, of course, we're crying because, like, that's traumatic. Like, who goes from you're pregnant to what if you get in a car accident and die when you leave here? So we're crying, and of course we say the prayer, and then we leave. And we were just so relieved to have that over with. Well, I end up having my child prematurely by 2 months, and he's delivered by an emergency C-section, so that was horrific. And the pastor came and he prayed with us, and he went and saw the baby in the NICU, and Gage was my baby. He was born 2 pounds 13 ounces on August 19th 2004, and he was in the NICU for exactly a month. And so when we finally got to bring him home, we were just hanging out at my parents' house, and he was sleeping, and we were watching a movie. My parents were out for the night, and Eric proposed to me. And I was shocked. I didn't see it coming. I didn't know he had bought the ring. He put this whole scrapbook together of our whole relationship, dating, and at the end, the last page said, "Will you marry me?" And he gave it to me. It was super sweet. But I felt like, when my parents got home, they weren't excited for us. It was kind of weird. And from that moment, I realized, I'm like, no one's happy for us. Like, some of my friends that were more my age were like, oh my gosh, I knew you guys would get married. But I felt like I was getting judged by all different sorts of people I didn't even know, people I didn't even, ask for their opinions. And I remember one lady that I worked with at the time, she was actually one of my managers. She pulled me aside when she found out that I was pregnant and told me how, life isn't going to be all rainbows and butterflies and a fairy tale with a white picket fence. It's going to be rough, and I don't want you thinking it's going to be perfect because you and Eric are together. And I just was so taken back by that. I'm like, okay, well, I never thought it was going to be easy. But for her to just come out and say that unwantingly, kind of threw me off. And so that was one thing that I felt judged about. But then again, when we got engaged, my mom wanted us to go meet with the same pastor again. And we had our hesitations, but, I was like, I already took away, I felt like I already disappointed my parents by having premarital sex, getting pregnant, so I was like, you know what, okay, we'll go to the pastor you want, we'll get married in your church, I'll do this for you. And so we met with the pastor, and thinking we would set up premarital counseling sessions with him, whatever we had to do to get him to marry us. And the first thing he says to us is, you've already made one mistake pointing to our child, why make another by getting married? And I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, I'm questioning, like, well, is he right? Are we crazy to do this? But I was like, you know what? Gage wasn't a mistake. We made the mistake by having premarital sex like most teens do. And it's so common now than it was back then. Granted, that was only about 9 years ago. But still, we were so angry, he refused to marry us. He said he had a cruise to Alaska to go on. And I think that was a way of getting out of it. So, we ended up just getting up and leaving furious. And, after that, I was just, and looking back on it now, I guess, I just, I feel like my mom even said, that she used to judge pregnant women when she'd see them by looking at their ring finger. And if they weren't married, she'd be like, oh, well, they ain't, But she said ever since, and I think everybody's guilty of that at some point, you know, like, oh, you're 16 and you're pregnant. Oh my gosh, what were you thinking? But you don't realize it. You know, I was raised in a Christian home and I didn't, you know, my parents never thought that would happen to me. I never thought I was going to get pregnant. And I just think you need to like take a step back and look at yourself and make sure your hands are clean before you start pointing the finger at everybody else. And so I guess I want to leave you with this really good message that I heard. It's a quote. I'm not sure. It's from an unknown author, but it's when you judge another, you do not define them, you define yourself. And I think that that is very true in all circumstances and all walks of life.